In Chapter 1, Lesson 4, we're going to be talking about loops. But first what I'd like to do in this Lesson 2 is talk about some of the principles and vocabulary words that we're going to need to understand in order to be able to start forming loops. So we're going to use a paintbrush in a minute to basically show some of what happens when you do some of this stuff properly. I'm going to use this noodle, which I would suggest you get one of these at Walmart or someplace. It's about 5 feet. You cut them in half. They cost about $4. They flex pretty good. They're a lot like a noodle, and I do an awful lot of pantomiming with a noodle before I start learning how to cast a cast. So I spend a lot of time with a noodle before I even put a rod in my hand when I'm learning a new cast. But this is going to be a way for me to demonstrate some of the principles and vocabulary that we're going to need to understand in order to become a really good caster. One thing, let me just go through a couple of vocabulary words first. When we make a cast here, this is a casting stroke. From here to here is a forward stroke, from here to here is a backward stroke. That stroke means that we have a sufficient amount of movement and activity in the rod to actually cause a loop to form when we stop. How that casting stroke is made, there's a couple of different parts of it. One is at any stroke, you've got the length of, this is called stroke length. That's how far my hand moves, sort of horizontal to the ground. Think of it as how far my hand moves. So this would be a really long casting stroke, and this would be a very short casting stroke. The other thing that happens, if you'll notice, if I go from here to here, I change the angle of my rod from here to here. This is rotation, so my rod actually rotates. So you can rotate with nothing but your wrist, or you can rotate with your body, but you still get some rotation. And every casting stroke, every loop is going to require, if you want to form a loop, is going to require that you actually create some amount of rotation. The casting stroke length itself is sort of optional, depending on how far you're casting and your style. When you talk about the rotation of the casting stroke, from here to here, you're changing the angle from here to here. That angle is a change, let's say in this particular case, of 90 degrees. That's called the casting arc. So that's the casting arc right here. That's a 90-degree casting arc. This, let's say, would be 120 degrees, 160 degrees, 180-degree casting arc. The casting arc is going to change depending on the amount of line you have and the speed with which you cast that line. So, but mostly it's going to be the amount of line that you have that's going to determine how big your casting arc is. So we're going to get into that a lot more in the next 5 or 6 lessons. But for right now, just know that this is called the casting arc, and that it's basically, I often refer to it as a piece of the pie. I'll tell a student, you need to increase the size of your piece of pie or decrease it, because that's going to determine what happens to your loops, which we'll talk a lot about more in Lesson 4 when we start talking about loops and loop formation. So let's review this. This is a casting stroke, a forward stroke, a cast backward stroke. This is stroke length, how far my hand moves, and this is rotation. All those things go into it. Now let's talk about the first big principle of casting. The first big principle of casting is basically I think it's the hardest one to learn. Most of the principles of casting you're going to see later on, you can see them or you can hear them. There's some visual auditory cue as to what you're doing. This one is feel. It's a matter of constant, smooth acceleration to a stop. Almost every cast we make requires some form of acceleration to an appropriate stop. Usually it's a fairly abrupt stop. Not always. Sometimes we want a nice soft stop. But we always want smooth acceleration, or almost always. There's very few times we don't want smooth acceleration. So smooth acceleration, if you watch me move, that's smooth acceleration. This is not smooth acceleration. Slow and then fast. That's two different accelerations. What I want is one smooth acceleration from 0 to 60. You can't really see my rod tip accelerating. It just looks like it's going to hold the same speed the entire time, but it can't be because I started at 0. If I start at 0 and end up at 60 right here, I've accelerated. So that's what you're aiming for at a cast, this nice smooth acceleration. So let's use a paintbrush and a bowl of water, and we're going to use this. I use this a lot to teach students at the beginning students and even veterans how to think about concentrating on smooth acceleration to a stop, because if you do it just right, this paintbrush is going to do, it's going to create a splash on you that's going to mimic or imitate proper acceleration or improper acceleration. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do this. We're going to start back here, and for this drill I use a little bit longer stroke length. So we're going to have a little bit longer stroke length and then go to a stop. So it's just going to be this. So it's nice and smooth. Now, one of the problems that people have is that they start too slow during a cast. It causes lots of problems. So if you start slow and then do that and you get no water, I'm going to wipe off this water. If you get no water on the back of your hand, it means you've started too slow. So if I do this, that's going to start too slow. And if you do that in a regular cast, it's going to cause you problems. By the same token, if you start too fast, you're going to get water way up here on your sleeve. So I got some drips of water all the way up here on my sleeve. That means I started too fast. If you start smooth, what you should do, the only water you should get is to be on the back of your hand. If it's a nice smooth acceleration, right there, I got a couple of drops of water right on the back of my hand, maybe on my cuff a little bit. That's fine, but I don't get any water up here, so it's nice and smooth. The other thing you want to do is a good hard stop. So let me show you something. I'm going to put this bowl down just for a second, and I want you to watch this. If I stop here, that's about as hard as I can stop, and I'm splashing this water into the wind right now. It's still going pretty good, but watch this. Watch what if I do this. You can see that stuff shoots off a lot more horizontal to the ground, much faster. The harder I stop, the better I am. So let's talk about a little bit about how you're going to nice smooth acceleration to a nice stop, and let's talk about the clock for a second. We're going to refer to this quite often when we're doing our instruction in the next probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 lessons. This is 12 o'clock, and this is 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. So in front of us is 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. Behind us is 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. So for this amount of line, we're just going to play like we have about like 40 or 50 feet of line. We're going to need a casting arc somewhere around 105 degrees or something like that, 110 degrees. So we're going to start back here, and we're going to come to here and do this. So our piece of pie and our rotation is about this. And you're going to see that may change given the amount of line and so on we have. But right now, for this drill, let's just do this. When I stop at about 10 o'clock. If I go too far down, my water goes down here instead of out flat. I want to always, when I'm thinking about casting, I always think about pounding a nail. So I'm pounding a nail with the tip of my rod into a wall. So I'm going to try to get the tip of my rod to pound into that wall perfectly straight into the wall at 90 degrees. If I bend the nail, my fly line is going to do funny things and not work as well. So you're going to do this. So what you want to do is, if you watch my hand, I'm going to turn around so you can see my hand a little bit. When I try to relax, don't have a death grip on this paintbrush, just sort of relax. Relax your hand. So when you get to here, and you want a nice firm stop. So you're going to see I rotate, and then a little bit more rotation with my wrist at the last little bit, but not a whole lot, just a little bit right here. That's what I'm doing. Now, if you watch my hand, it's kind of loose right here, and then all of a sudden, as I start to stop, it tightens. So it's this. Same thing in the back. I'm trying to be as relaxed as I can. My hand is relaxed, and then I firm up with these two fingers. So these two fingers are relaxed coming back, and then they get firm. Same thing here. So that's something you want to think about. One more thing we want to talk about at this point is, let's talk about grip. A lot of people have different ideas about grip. Some people, and I'm going to turn around again so you can see this better, some people cast like this. Their forefinger on top of the rod, and the rod's going this way, so over the spine of the rod. That's a good technique if you're casting smaller amounts of line, smaller rods, smaller lines, shorter distances. I don't like this technique particularly well for big long lines, or for, like, if you're fishing a 9 or a 10 weight rod or a 12 weight rod. It's awful hard for most people's index finger to stop a rod, especially in the back, or to push a rod in the front. So I don't like this grip, but I do use it a lot for short casts when I'm casting for short little casts with 5-weight lines or 4-weight lines or 3-weight lines with dry flies in trout water. This grip is sort of my favorite grip. My favorite grip is I use the thumb, and where my thumb goes is where my rod tip goes. So that's a good grip because it's pretty strong. This is a grip a lot of people use, this grip, which is a V grip. And then there's some grips that are sort of moderate moderations of those different grips. But this grip is also a good grip. So whatever grip you like is fine for now, and you may want to play around with your grip. I think that's mostly a matter of style and not a matter of actual, absolute necessity to pick a particular kind of grip. So use that paintbrush and just see if you can't get water to splash straight in a straight line, just like that. So a little bit of water just landed on the back of my hand. So that's exactly what I want. And I'd hold the brush like this. You get more spring than if you hold it like this. So hold it like this instead of like this. So there's the paintbrush drill, and remember that the first principle is smooth acceleration to an appropriate stop. That's the first big principle, and let's review just really quickly what the terms are. We've got stroke length, which is the length our hand goes. A casting stroke is from here to here and from here to here, and then we have rotation.